Artificial intelligence is reinventing business as we speak. You can either get up to speed or get left behind. The choice is yours, and really, it's a no-brainer. Join CognitivePath founders Geoff Livingston and Greg Verdino as they chat with AI experts about the latest ideas, trends, and technologies that are creating the future of business today. This is No Brainer.
Hey everybody, it's Greg Verdino. Welcome to another episode of No Brainer. I am here as usual with Geoff Livingston. How are you, my man?
Very good, my friend. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm ready for a weekend. We are recording this on a Friday. I will say specifically it is Friday, January 10th, with a space that moves as quickly as this space moves. It's worth letting everyone know what our timestamp is, because by Monday the 13th, I'm sure it's going to be a totally different story.
That's right. Although I have to say, I was shocked CES did not have as much of an impact as I thought it would on the AI paradigm.
It was a little shocking. I think a lot of the narrative was, okay, they're throwing that same old AI into every old piece of shit they can.
That's right. The toilet came back. The AI toilet came back. There was, remember that last year we did that podcast where it's that talking chat GPT toilet.
The AI toilet remains one of my favorites. I'm not going to say I haven't purchased 3 of them, but yeah, that's one of my favorites. Anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in again. As always, just another reminder, as we always do, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, to like us, to love us, to link to us, to share, to shout, to review, to do all those good things to help get the word out, to show your support, and to keep us keeping on. In the meantime, before you're doing that, or maybe while you're doing that, hit the like button. Geoff, why don't you introduce our guest for this episode?
Sure thing. Well, we've got Conor Sibley with us, who's the CTO over at Higher Logic, and I've met Conor through the speaking circuit, and I'm quite frankly surprised I hadn't met him sooner, because he's definitely been at DC for a long time. And for those of you that don't know who Higher Logic is, they provide community-based software as well as other forms of software to help organizations best serve their constituents, and that includes marketing automation systems. Conor's company, Higher Logic, serves both trade associations and companies, and so he has a very unique perspective about how AI is evolving, not just from the community perspective, but how it's impacting the larger personalization space, how it's impacting all sorts of corporate dynamics and data management and data governance and all those horrible headaches that nobody really wants to talk about, but give them an agent and they're at the table chatting. So with that, Conor, how are you today?
Great, man. Great to see you guys.
Very good. So first of all, we're really excited about 2025. I know you are. You guys had that big integration announcement with Watson X. And how is everything going at Higher Logic with your integration of AI into the larger picture and suite of services?
Awesome. The thing is that, like, we had an opportunity last year to start launching AI tools and services. And when we started we were like, oh, we don't want to be just one of the other vendors that's like launching something that sucks.
You mean like at CES?
Like a toilet. Yeah. So we slowed down a little bit, and we were like, let's try to be intentional about how we end up like launching this, because what we decided was that like one of the best ways for us to launch like a good service was to start for us to actually start using AI services and experience like some of these like great experiences, and then experience some of the really poor ones, and then learn from it, and then try to see if we could build those into our products. And so now that we're starting to actually deploy this stuff, the other thing that we're starting to realize is that, not all AIs are created equal. I mean, we could go down a lot of rabbit holes. Not all AIs are created equal. It's really hard to develop like good customer experiences. Even if you end up creating something that has a lot of value, it doesn't mean that people are going to use it the way that you think they're going to use it. I don't know where you guys want to start.
Let me throw one at you, and Greg, tell me if you think I'm off on this, but one of the things that we see that's pretty unique about what you guys do is that you have these communities, and each community really is a source of domain knowledge, right? I mean, if it's a company, these people that are on the community, the user community, if you would, perhaps, they have more knowledge about how that product works for that brand and how to make it beneficial for them, or, some of the ways to navigate perhaps some of the foibles. We know no brand is 100% perfect. And on the trade association side, which I think is a larger side of your business, but on the trade association side, you have all these professionals that are literally the experts in their sector talking about the problems in their sector or the advancements in their sector and how to best navigate that kind of challenge. And that's really fascinating. And it's an incredible source of information. So I know you guys are working to integrate LLMs and take that domain specific knowledge and allow people to better tap into it and access it and summarize it. Hey, tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on that and how these communities are really unique data gold.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. When you start talking about AI, you have to be really specific about what component of AI you're talking about. Like underneath the AI world, there's like, you're starting to hear people start talking about like, agents, and then you're talking about all these other capabilities around LLMs and generating text. Then there's like something else underneath, like, AI that probably a lot of professionals are starting to hear about, this RAG, results augmented generation. So Geoff, is that what you want me to dig into a little bit? Like, the work that
go
we're
for it.
doing around RAG? So just to be like, specific. So the concept of RAG is that think about like that the generative AI, you got like, Chat GPT over here that's like, hosted by OpenAI. You've got the community website, like, sitting over here. And what we do is we allow somebody to log in and then this little like window pops up, and in the window, someone can ask a question. And historically on our platform, people would ask a question and they'd have to ask a question that would get posted inside of the platform. And then we'd send the email out to people's inboxes. People would be able to interact on the website and answer their questions, or they'd be able to, from their inbox or from a mobile app respond. The turnaround time on that, because it's like, asynchronous, is sometimes days, right? To get a question answered, versus now, like if someone has a question, they could go to a website and they could ask a question. And instead of it having to go and get distributed to a bunch of like, users and have to wait for them to respond, what's happening is there's like a search that's being issued. And so think of it kind of like, like a search engine on the back end where a search is being issued, and it's not just being issued related to just the words that you used. There's like a little AI component in there that's figuring out the intention. So it's doing something called like, vectorizing your question. So it figures out the intent of your question, and then it issues that like weird latent space vectorized like number over to a search engine, comes back, figures out the intent of your question, pulls about back all of the content that's in the platform that was related to the intent of your question. And then now that you've got all that content sitting in there, something that AIs are really good at is summarizing. What it then does is it takes all of the content that was similar to the question that you ended up like asking, it summarizes it, and then gives it back to the user. So something that would have taken a very long time in the past, because you have to wait around for a person to answer your question, as long as the community platform has or blogs or someone has asked that question in the past, that stuff will end up surfacing, get summarized, and then come back as a response to the user. And so there's a ton of different cool, like, opportunities for like, our customer bases, which, as you brought up, we've got a ton of nonprofit customers, but we've also got a ton of commercial customers. And some of the commercial customers, especially in like, the SaaS space, right, we've got like large multi-billion-dollar organizations that use it for things like, something called customer case deflection. Right. And incredible for that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one question for you with that is, even though somebody may say it in the community or on a review or whatever kind of post it might be in a forum, how do you use other forms of data in the enterprise to validate or devalidate that comment as quote unquote good?
Yeah. So that's really, really hard. Imagine if, you're one of the people over it. You're someone who has to score whether or not like, a question is like, something's been answered correctly. So if you've got a community which is open to the public, something like Reddit.
Yeah. God help us all.
Yeah. God help us all. What's interesting is that the information that's on Reddit and Twitter is the information that was used to train the original models.
And you wonder why they hallucinate, right?
You wonder why they sometimes like, came back with some pretty crazy answers in the past, right?
Yeah.
And so there's some arguments that people have made around like, stuff like in wisdom of the crowds that like, there's millions of crazy people putting in crazy answers to all sorts of questions. But once you end up hitting scale, you start to have all of the like, the logical responses congeal, right? And so that's what you end up like hoping on the public, the public web and the public internet. But the cool thing about the platforms that we end up hosting is typically there's not going to be, it's not going to be crazy people out on Twitter and other places like that, like, Twitter, Reddit, anonymous people. These are people that are typically professionals.
Right.
And these professionals, it's highly unlikely that they're going to offer up like a crazy question. A crazy answer. And so that, and like we've also got functionality in the product that allows you to say that like this is an answered like post. To say that there was like a question and there were a ton of different answers in there. There can be a verified question, and so we end up prioritizing things like that to help to feed back to the LLM that this has been that this is an answered question. I mean, Geoff, what you're bringing up is a really, 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 really hard thing to like navigate.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg. Did you have something you were saying?
I mean, to me, it's certainly an example of the old adage of garbage in, garbage out, right? That if you have a relatively unchecked source of data, a Reddit, a Twitter, 4chan, or whatever else has been used to train the large language models, the foundational models, you have a really high level of risk there. When you get inside an organization's own key stakeholders, whether those stakeholders are customers in the case of a corporate client, let's say, or members in the case of an association, you greatly reduce the level of, hopefully, the level of garbage, or increase the level of signal to the noise. I also, though, as we're talking about this, it seems like if you're, let's say, an association, just to use that as the example, there's a mindset shift that has to happen here, right? In that you're already probably struggling with data, period, right? Getting data unified, cleaned up in a workable form.
Oh my
right?
Lord.
Yeah.
You're probably just now coming around, as everybody is over the course of the past couple of years, to this sort of aha moment that content is data. Right? And then you get inside, let's say, an association's forums and now, or community, and all of a sudden now conversation is content. Content is data, therefore, right, the transitive property, is that right?
Yes.
Therefore, conversations are data, and now you have to start to think seriously about how you leverage that data in a way that benefits the organization. So I'm curious, how do you get an organization to make that logical leap to understand that there is gold in them thar hills?
This is something that we're all going to have to do as an industry, is basically talking to people about, what kind of value that they actually have that they don't realize that they have. This is, this is like blogging speaking circuit for 2025 for you guys, right?
Right.
We're starting to think about the world through the lens of like, there's content, like underneath the data umbrella, there's three different kinds of data that we're looking at that will help us in parting like signal versus noise. You're talking about the garbage in and garbage out. Like, how do you end up figuring out what's garbage? Well, we're starting to think about it through the lens of like, okay, you got content, you got structured data, and then you've got interactions. And so think about like, the interactions. So interactions actually impart some really interesting, like, signal to the content. So say, and this is something that you guys ever heard of Glean?
Yeah.
So Glean's a product that we're starting to roll out inside of Higher Logic. And if anybody out there is interested in being a little bit nerdy about like, some of this kind of stuff, like, go take a look at some of the videos that they've got out there. But they actually impart some really interesting, like, cross-platform interaction, metrics that end up like, showing that. So say you've got a piece of content on your CMS, or you got a piece of content in your journal, or you got a piece of content in your community platform. If there's like, traditionally, you end up seeing a lot of people like, just tracking metrics inside of like, a data silo. Once you start to track, like if people inside of your Slack channel, inside of your corporate Slack channel, or if people are emailing like links to content, or if people are inside of like, Confluence, which is like a internal organization document, like, documentation platform, if they start creating links from within like, your different data silos to content inside of another data silo, that
It validates it.
an incredible amount of value. And so this is like the thing about, creating something called knowledge graphs.
Right.
And so I don't want to get too technical about some of this kind of stuff, but like, this burgeoning world of data, your people are going to start to hear about like RAG and knowledge graphs and all the rest of this kind of stuff over the next, like, couple of years, because yeah, there's all sorts of fascinating stuff that we could.
Well, I guess to get nerdy, I'm gonna go technical on us with data integration and making sure that there are all those different sources beyond just the community, because I know that that's also a key initiative for you, and it's also something that we face over and over and over again. How are we going to get organizations thinking better about their architecture and their governance so that they can actually take advantage of AI? I'm going to rant for a second, but this whole AI agent conversation is really lovely. It's lovely, but it's not realistic because most people don't even know how to like find their own SharePoint and integrate it into Salesforce. I mean,
and none of their processes are documented in any way, shape, or form.
there is no process. Let's be honest. They're shooting from the hip. I mean, like, look, nobody wants to admit that, but the reality is 95% of organizations don't really have a strong data governance policy. They don't really integrate their sources, and they certainly don't clean up their data on a regular basis. How are we going to get people to the point where they do that? Then we could talk about the agent stuff, because the reality is until you get that data a little bit stronger and in a better place, you're going to throw a wrench into that agent, whatever it might be. It doesn't really matter how narrow it is, and it's going to go off the rails, and you don't know what the point of failure is going to be.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like a chicken and egg problem. It's going to be really hard to convince the business owners that there's a bunch of value there,
Right.
up until they start to see some of the value. And so then they're going to like, it's going to like cycle and cycle and cycle, where projects are going to fail. And then people are going to talk about, well, obviously it failed because you didn't have your data governance in place. And then there's going to be data, and it's just going to cycle and spin.
Well, the good news is it's not a Jaguar, right? Like once you buy it, you're screwed. I hope you don't have a Jaguar. I'm sorry. I know Greg does. No, I'm just kidding.
Did you say Cybertruck?
Cybertruck, plastic panel. But right, it's not like that. I mean, fortunately, we can fix it. But do you foresee a moment where perhaps there's going to be enough people that kind of go off the rails, that people just generally course correct as the adoption curve moves along?
Well, so I think what's going to have to happen is especially in some of the verticals that we operate in, I think it's going to be much easier for verticals to sort of come together and be like, hey, look, we've got like this incredible opportunity to do things that'll make it so that like everyone in the professional association space, everyone in the trade association space, everyone in the SaaS space, if we can get like people saying, hey, I really want to use things like agents. I really want to do things like RAG. I really want to like unlock the value of the content and the data that I've got inside of my organization. What people are going to start doing is they're going to start leaning on their vendors. And when they start leaning on their vendors are going to do things like adopt standards. And once they adopt standards, then we're going to start to be able to actually like utilize some of these, like, crazy cool technologies like agents and using like, agentic platforms. You brought up, something around like, data governance. Like, when you look at like, platform A, B, C, and D, how do you know that C Sibley at Gmail is C Sibley at Higher Logic is, how do you know that all these people are the same person? Because I use that same identity to log into all of these different like association technology platforms. How do you end up attributing all those actions to the same person? There's ridiculous problems that we end up like having to solve and deal with on a daily basis because of the stuff that we've got just internally at Higher Logic. Needless to mention, like, integrating in with the other partners in the ecosystem.
Well, with your partner ecosystem, though, you do have the benefit of being kind of, at least within the association space, being the big boy on the block. So you could kind of dictate a little bit, maybe?
It would be really nice if that was the case. It'd be really nice if that was the case. I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, I can pick up a phone and call an executive someplace else and be like, hey, can you please help? And they'll actually take the phone call. but they're not going to change their internal systems and processes, right? So it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And I mean, Geoff and Greg, we've talked a little bit about some of the, like, this panacea. Like, if we were able to get like everyone inside of, our vertical to adopt, like, some sort of, like, data structure standards, that would be absolutely incredible. And so that's something that I'm going to try to see if I can start pushing for in 2025, is being prescriptive about, like, I think that everybody should adhere to certain data standards. And then if we can start, like, as Higher Logic starting to publish some of those things, and then say, hey, what do you guys think? And try to see if we can get, like, our vertical to start adopting, like, some standards. I think it'll make it so that there will be a ton of capabilities, and there'll be a ton of value that'll get unlocked. I mean, we talked a lot about this. Like, part of the reason Higher Logic that we've got, so we've got some other vendors that we brought together underneath something that we call the Thrive Partnership, because we started to realize that, the value of our platform, like, and the value of some of these other Thrive, like, platforms, there's a 1 + 1 = 3, because what we're able to do is we're able to integrate the data from their platforms into ours. And then we're able to hit people up with the right opportunity at the right time. And then you see more members engaging with the features from these other platforms because we're adhering to strong, structured data contracts. That value was only unlocked because we're starting to be, like, highly specific about some of the things that you're talking about. So yeah, we could talk at length of that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like if there's a running thread through a lot of this more technical stuff, is that it ain't easy, right? Whether it's shifting a mindset, whether it's getting people to do the hard work of aligning around standards, whether it's getting them to do probably the even harder work of wrangling data out of 15 different systems and getting it into the same format, the same structure, putting it in the same place, standing up a legitimate, kind of AI system or systems on top of it to actually do the things they want to do, and all of that's hard work, and it's expensive work, takes a lot of resources, expertise, etc. But obviously there's got to be value in it. Like, so how do you communicate that value if you're talking to an association ED, or you're talking to a senior leader at a SaaS company, let's say, whichever, how do you articulate what the benefit of doing this is? What are the opportunities you unlock if you're able to really get your even just community data to go to work for you?
So do you guys want to talk about some of the stuff that we're trying to see if we can do around agents and agent?
Yeah, come
Sure.
on, let's have some fun.
Yeah, like, what we want to do is, I mean, just imagine if, like, everybody out there knows what an API is, right?
Right.
And
Let's hope so.
imagine that, well, hopefully, every vendor's got an API. Imagine if there was an agent that was, like, sitting in front of every single API, and you could basically allow your customers then to have a conversation with your API to undertake any of the actions inside of, like, your platform. Now, take a step back and then go, okay, well, if I've got, like, a conversational interface that allows me to interact with my AMS or my CRM, and I got a conversational interface that allows me to interact with my community platform, and I got a conversational interface that allows me to interact with my marketing automation platform, my job board, all of these platforms within your ecosystem, there's a concept around, like, agent orchestration, where you could end up having a orchestrator that would sit on top of, like, each one of those component platforms, those capabilities that were exposed by APIs. And you could then walk into an association or an organization and then say, there's a concept of something in the product management world called jobs to be done. And you could sit down with, like, somebody inside of, like, a membership organization and association and say, tell me about, like, how you run renewals. Do you do the same thing every year? Are there best practices? And if you can enumerate all of those best practices in natural language, you can put that into a workflow. And then that workflow, that playbook or that workflow, that workflow probably ends up, like, spanning not just the functionality inside of your CRM or your AMF, but it's probably tons of your different products inside of your technology ecosystem. And if you can just write down those best practices, then if that staff member leaves, you now can end up like, giving those best practices to somebody else. And then you can onboard those people really quickly. But not only that, if this future of like, agents actually ends up like, like being like realized, you wouldn't just be able to give that to the next staff member. You could give that to an agent, and then you could see if that agent could undertake all of those activities around like running your membership renewal campaigns for you. And it wouldn't just make it so that like you saved a little bit of time. And it wouldn't just make it so that you didn't think about all the things that like when you ask a human to do something, how many things that they mess up, how many things they miss. Do you know what AI doesn't do? Like, it keeps on trying until it's successful, right? And it doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, it doesn't go away, right?
And it's fast, right? It's so much faster.
Yeah.
And if you can, and so this is the big difference that I've started to see over the last like year with my interaction with like, AI platforms, was because I have a, software background. I first started using it to do like inside of the thing that I use to write code, do something called completions, where I would just expect it to, I'd start typing something and then it would just finish off the little piece of code that I was writing. And I was like, man, this is transformative. This is amazing. That is not how I'm using it now. I thought that even just that was absolutely amazing because it was just completing my thoughts. I'm not using it to complete my thoughts anymore. I'm using it to start my thoughts. So I have conversations about like my approach to problems now. And ever since I started having conversations about my approach to problems, I'm starting to see all the blind spots that I have, all of like, the biases and the preconceived notions about like my approach to things, how they were just like, wrong, how there's probably thousands of different ways that I could do things. And I get all of these options back. And then once I get all these options back with like crazy different approaches, I then can like, take those and then I can just write those things down and I can start executing on those things. Or what I can do is I can use an AI term called chain of thought. I can say, give me the chain of thought to actually like accomplish this like high level strategic task. It outlines all that stuff for me. And if I've got agents that allow me to automate the execution of those things. So just going back to like, membership renewals, if I say like, if I start having like a strategic conversation about membership renewals with a chat bot, and then I ask it to, once I'm like, cool with, and I've gone back and forth a ton of times, and I got this like, awesome framework for running my membership renewal campaigns. And then I ask it to outline all the steps. Imagine if I ask it to outline all my steps and then I then feed into it. These are all of the products inside of my technology ecosystem. And then I ask it to do the secondary thing of like, now that I know that I need to set up like, drip campaigns, and I got, well, all of those things should be steered towards my marketing automation platform. And then if I had something that was like, okay, now create discount codes for people X number of months in, I've got something that's doing a whole bunch of like high level strategic stuff for me. That's just mind boggling.
Sure.
I mean, It's like game changing stuff. Like that's the thing that I think is like the most cool is having like an incredibly brilliant consultant that understands technology and product and membership and engagement that you can just
do things with,
talk to for $20 a month, dude.
I know. I use it actually a lot. I know you guys both know that I run a lot, so I've been using it quite a bit for coaching, not as the coach, but to validate or devalidate ideas with coaching. Especially Greg knows I've been injured for like the past month, so I'm coming back from it. And number one disease of runners is it just hurts a little bit, I can run on it, and literally just using it as a barometer. Am I safe to go? No, don't run. I mean, and like literally Claude, I use Claude. It's gotten to the point of training enough on my certain thread that I'm working on with it. It's like, really, you shouldn't run.
Don't even ask me anymore.
Don't do it. It's incredible.
But to kind of put a point on the pencil,
Sure.
Connor, and you, Geoff, too, but Connor said the smarter stuff, is as we would have expected. We're the no-brainers. We bring the brainers on.
Good recovery, bud. I'll remember that.
Just in terms of some of the things that you were saying, Connor, there are like, if you level it up to like the business challenges, right? You've got, associations in particular, right? Since you were talking about membership, right, are notoriously under-resourced for all the things they need to do all the time in virtually every area, right? So, the value proposition of being able to do more work better and faster with, let's say, the same resources, I don't want to put anybody out of work, is a tremendous value proposition for AI. The idea of taking error rates and whatnot, inefficiencies out of a critical process like member renewals or retention or acquisition or, event sponsorship sales or whatever, right? Any of those processes that are business critical, taking the points of friction out of those is incredibly valuable, because that obviously creates upside for the association. These are just, to me, these are obvious kinds of wins, right? That exactly. Any leader in an association or another kind of nonprofit or in a for-profit, if you change some of the language, right? These are obvious wins for AI that in a lot of ways justify the decision to at least experiment, if not legitimately invest in these kinds of tools, these kinds of systems, building these kinds of things, doing the hard work, kind of strip away the excuse of this is too hard, this is too resource intensive, we don't have the budget, to, an investment has a payoff, right? Because there's clear payoffs that you're describing.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredibly clear. I mean, just like a hyper specific one. I mean, imagine if you were an association in events and you come up with this like massive plan for your annual event, and you resource it with tons of staff and time, and you come up with this like great way of using all of the different technology systems. And you can wrangle those people because, a lot of associations, they make an enormous amount of money off of their annual event, so they'll resource it with people. If you wrote down all of those steps for encouraging people to come to your annual event, you could just take that and you could replicate that for
that sounds like a great agent, right?
Even as webinars, right? And so dude, that's that's exactly what I'm trying to say, right? Like, once you end up resourcing, and writing down the steps,
and you have the process and you have the data to back it, then you can rock, right?
Copy paste. And so this is the point, right? You can just copy paste, and you can put an enormous amount of stuff on autopilot in the future. And then people are working at a strategic level instead of the tactical level.
Right.
And so I think
that's the thing, because the same person who might be doing the high level event concept is the same person sitting handing out lanyards on Tuesday, right? And everything in between, right? So how do you, obviously an AI, until it becomes a robot, is not going to hand out a lanyard, but,
okay, Isaac Asimov.
NVIDIA says it's coming, but you know what I'm saying? An agent isn't going to literally hand out the lanyard, but there are so many of those rote, routine, repeatable tasks that are just time sucks for somebody who could be and should be working at the product innovation level, the strategy level, to really move that association or enterprise forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's moving from it's moving from what do I have to do mechanically today to what could we be doing to increase engagement, right? And that is really powerful. And it's the thing that kills me is that all these people that are out there being AI naysayers. I equate that with technology naysayers, where they're like, oh, this is going to take jobs, and I'm like, no, every time that there's ever been a large technology innovation, jobs have changed.
That's right. That's right.
Jobs
the whole
changed.
AI slop argument is very short-sighted. Very short-sighted.
Yeah, people's lives will get better. What would you rather do? Spend 4 or 5 hours logging in from one platform to another to undertake these and then be like, oh, whoops, I didn't copy the link from this platform correct. No, automate that stuff with conversational agents that sit in front of the APIs. They just do that for you.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
That's the future that we're in. Get strategic. Right? Think strategically, and then try to see how the tools can support your strategic initiatives.
And also
That's where we're
learn
going.
from those mistakes rather than writing it off. Learn from the use case. That's not a good use for this tool. But there are good uses. Let's not write off everything. You're throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah.
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 We are running out of time, Connor. Man,
Whoops.
we could definitely have you back on, and we should. We definitely should. But until we get to part 2, where can people find it?
Well, where can people find me?
Yeah, you're the man.
Normally like hiding in like from my kids. They're not home from school yet.
Mine just got back too. Aren't you happy they finally
Let's
got
specify
back to
where
school?
can they find you online?
Yeah. So Higher Logic, like I'm LinkedIn, Conor Sibley, Twitter, Conor Sibley, and then C Sibley at Higher Logic. I love talking about AI, technology, any of this kind of stuff. Like, please hit me up. Like this is something that's near and dear to my heart. And I love the concept of like, enabling people to be happier. And I think that a big driver of that is like people not sitting there just typing at their keyboard, being able to like dream. Like, Geoff, you were talking about like, talking to ChatGPT. Are you actually talking to it? Like, it's been amazing to me just like talking to agents and then having them like do stuff for me. Like being able to like, sit back and just like speak to something and then have it like undertake tasks for me. Oh my God, I'd be so much happier.
There you go. The AI agent future, man. Very cool.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we've enjoyed talking at you and to you, and of course talking to everybody out there who is listening or watching. If you are catching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you are on one of the many, many podcast platforms that we distribute on, whether that is Spotify or Apple Podcasts or iHeart or wherever the heck else we are, because you're listening, where you found us. Please, again, be sure to follow the channel and rate, review, like, share, do all that kind of good stuff. Thank you to, it's been a long time since we've thanked our friends at the Marketing Podcast Network for supporting the show and to bringing sponsors our way. So thank you to the Marketing Podcast Network. And thank you, of course, to all of you who have been listening. I hope you got some good value out of the show, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.